Hey everyone, welcome to a very different video here on the channel. Much different than my per usual gameplay video. But this is going to be a little bit more of a creative process video as to how I create the custom 3D logos that you see on all the thumbnails, as well as the custom title card intro sequences that I do for many of the series or new series that I put up on the channel as well. I've always enjoyed doing those. I've done many of them on individual projects, some of them in high school, some after that. But after I've gotten better and better tools, and I've also just improved myself, I've started doing a lot more of them on those YouTube series, and I've highly enjoyed doing those. So since that's the case, I kind of also got this little idea here where I figured maybe I would ought to share some of this with you guys and see what you think about it. Maybe you guys can learn something from this if you want to actually do something like this in your own stuff. That'd be really cool. Or if it's just something that might pique your guys' interest, well, that's always a good thing too. So yeah, very interesting little idea that I had here, and we'll see how it goes. If you guys do also want to see some more of this stuff on the channel, definitely let me know, and I will consider doing that. I've never done it really before anyway, because I haven't really been much of a tutorial sort of guy. I've definitely lacked the confidence to do that, but we'll give it a shot and see how it goes. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the process of making these logos and intros. Okay, so before we get into the meat and potatoes here of how all this even works, I want to kind of talk about why I even do this in the first place. And really that just comes from my side passion of watching intros and enjoying trailers, like watching the big title pop up on the screen as it's revealed on the trailer and things like that. I've always enjoyed stuff like that, and just graphics in that sort of regard as well. I've always enjoyed that, and that was one of the first things that I got into in high school. I did graphic design for a year, and then I moved on to video production, and then after that is when I started getting in more and more into the animation and 3D and all that stuff after that, where I found my true passion of environmental building and lighting in things like Unreal Engine or Blender or whatever. It could be real-time or offline rendering, whatever. You name it. But it all pretty much started with 3D logo design and all that stuff, and graphic design. Stuff like that. So that's kind of where the passion came from, and I've always just been actively involved in doing that for whatever project I'm involved with, or if it's just my own personal project, I've always kind of been at the helm of that. So that's really where it comes from. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the things that make this all possible on the machine side of things. So, there are two primary software that I use for this process. It usually starts off here in After Effects, and then if there is anything else that I have to do post, like after this, and this is mainly for the intro sequences. Things for like logo design and thumbnails, I could usually just do in here, and that's all there is. But for intro sequences, there might be some extra steps afterward that I find are easier to do in your traditional editing software, whatever it is. So that is where HitFilm comes into play. I've used this editing software for years. It was made by FX Home, which sadly is no longer a thing. They were bought out by Artlist, I believe. So their free version is still running HitFilm Express, so I'm just using that for right now. But yeah, I've used it for years. I love it. So that is what I go to for right now. But yeah, otherwise, the rest of it is just done right here in After Effects. Now there are also plenty of other tools, handy dandy tools that I have that are crucial in the steps for making these logos and intros. And a lot of these plugins come from a company called Video Copilot. These guys are awesome. Video Copilot's been around for quite some time. I don't exactly know when they were founded or when they started, but yeah, they've been around for a hot minute, and I have very many of their products. They definitely have some good quality stuff. They are a little bit pricey, especially Element. That's one of the more expensive ones, but it is absolutely worth it for the long run, per se. Now, there are 3 of them that I use way more than any of the other plugins. A lot of them are kind of just extra little pieces to the main puzzle here. But yeah, Element, of course, Optical Flares, and Saber are the 3 that I use all the time. Heat Distortion I don't use that much, but it does come in handy whenever it is needed. But yeah, I definitely don't use that one near as much as the other 3, so I will cover those 3 in this sort of tutorial, scuffed tutorial, if you will. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start off with Element 3D. This one is the ground, the foundation of everything that starts here. This is what will turn whatever you throw into the scene into a beautiful 3D extrusion, whether it's a text layer or a mask layer of any kind that you make. It does it all. Or if there's any other 3D models from other plugins that you have bought from Video Copilot, or just bring in yourself from somewhere else, that also can be done, interacted with, and messed with in Element as well, which is sweet. But in this case, we will just be using a text layer. Now, I do have this scene set up. This will actually be the scene I will use for the Black Mesa intro sequence and logo when that series comes out later on after the next couple of Painkiller series. So, let's start off with our text layer. Now, as I mentioned previously, yes, our text layer is what we're going to need in order to turn the 2D layer into an actual 3D object. So let's go ahead and turn that on. Now it looks really big in this case just because that's what I have the scale as for the moment. So just so you can see the whole thing, let's go ahead and tone that down a little bit. There we go. Now we can actually see it. Now the text layer, of course, you can set it up however you like. Set the font, set the scale, whatever. It does not matter. Spacing, that is all up to you. It just depends on what you're going for in terms of the logo, because the extrusion will follow exactly what this is. It's basically its own mask that it's looking at. So it will follow exactly what you style it as, which is very nice. Takes out a lot of the extra work for you, so that's very cool. Now, as far as setting the style of the logo, I pretty much always just look at what the original one is, and then I go heavily based off of that, and then I just try and match it up with that the best I can, or at least trying to stay loyal to it, while also spicing it up and adding my own little flares to it. That's pretty much the whole idea of making these custom logos. Sometimes I nail it right at the beginning, or sometimes I change it like 50 times. That's just how this kind of work goes. Sometimes you'll nail it on the first one and be like, yes, this is perfect, or yeah, you'll go through several changes throughout and be like, no, this is not quite the one. This is just not quite there. We're getting there, and then finally, yes, this is it right here. So, sometimes it's just trial and error until you finally get it, or you nail it. So that's just how it goes. But in this case, we got ourselves a good start. Now you may be wondering why there's certain spacing going on here, and that will make a lot more sense later on, because there will be a nice little ring that goes around the Lambda logo here to create the full Lambda symbol that you usually see in the game as well. So that is the reason why that is spaced out like that. Let's go ahead and scale that back to what it was, so that way when we enable our Element 3D layer, it will look correct. Now, all of these plugins you must place on their own solid layers. So you can just go layer, new solid, or if there's room for it down here, just right click new solid. Same exact thing. But yeah, once you place Element 3D, which you will find in this effects menu under Video Copilot, all of those will be here. Just drag and drop it onto your solid, and there you go. It is already set up for you nice and neat, like so. Now, it looks nice and compact right from the start, but as soon as you open one thing up, boom, you have all these controls. Now, it looks intimidating and there's a lot to it, but it is very nice because you have so much control over everything. You have control of all the design, the scale, rotation, like there's so much stuff. There's so many different parameters that you have control over, which is very nice. So yeah, you don't have to worry about the scale or anything of the text because you can always also just adjust it later on anyway. So the text is simply just the mask creation, so it knows how to formulate its 3D model, and that's basically it. After that, you can do whatever the hell you want to it, which is perfect. So we will have, in this case, just one group, but you can have up to 5. And the next kind of important step for this is the custom layers, because even though you have your text layer here, if you just leave it there, well, Element is not going to know what to convert to a 3D model unless you tell it. So that's where this custom layers tab comes into play. There are many slots in here to 15. So in this case, we only have 1. So you'll just click here and you just choose your text layer or whatever mask layer that you have. Choose that, and now it knows what to look for. So now that we have that all set up, let's go ahead and hit scene setup. And we are brought to a completely different window. We got our 3D world right here, a couple of different menus, outliners, whatever you want to call them. We won't worry about too many of them. We just want to worry about this one right here and a few things here. In our main scene outlier tab, so first of all, the group folders. So this is where those 5 groups are organized, is this right here. And we only have one group folder, so that's all we need. Now, at first, when you open this window, even though you have filled in that first slot, nothing will be here yet. Like, nothing is going to be here, and that's fine. What you'll have to do is you'll just hit extrude, and then it'll create an extrusion model right here. It'll just do one. If you don't have any text layers or anything like that, but you still want to mess with 3D models or just create primitive shapes, you can just do that by clicking this. Or again, if you have any other extra packs that contain 3D models, they'll show up here after you install them, and you can mess with all those as well. Very fun. But yeah, let's go ahead and start with our extrusion models. Now, you can change your path right here. So if you have multiple different slots filled with different things, you can just change it right there. Let's go back to 1 so that we have it. Now, notice when I did that, something weird happened right here, and that's exactly why there are also different extrusion models here. I basically duplicated this model so that way I could get a different texture on this right here, and that way I will be able to have 2 separate things but in the same group folder. I don't actually have to have separate group folders for it, which is nice. However, we don't want duplicate letters, so in order to fix that, we just come down to this little guy right here, and we are now able to disable or enable the individual letters or 3D extrusions within the main one, which is awesome. Very handy feature. So since path 2, that's the little Lambda logo right there, that's enabled on the orange material, so we want to disable that on this one so we don't have any duplicates. Otherwise, sometimes like you won't see both layers but that's just some extra piece that you can't see, so there's no need to have it there. It's just extra weight that doesn't need to be there. Yep, now we can go ahead and switch back to this. Alright, now let's go ahead and talk about the materials for just a second. Now many of these materials again are an extra pack that is also from Video Copilot as well. So again, a lot of these other packs that I have are just extra pieces to the puzzle here. So we got Pro Shaders, which is what I'm using here, and I just chose this metal material right here. There are many different materials you can choose from, which is very nice. Yeah, chose that metal. Any sort of material that you have in your scene as well will show up in the scene materials, so you can just click and drag, and you don't have to go dig through the library again, which is nice. Yep, then you just drag the material on this. It'll apply it to whatever is on that model, and there you go. You have your base material. Now for the extrusion model, the other properties that you can change other than just moving it and rotating it, you can change its polygon count, so you can make its path resolution very, very high, which I have it on here because I want it to look good. But you can also optimize it and change it to whatever your system requirements needs. I mean, it's extreme on this, but I mean, any machine can run this. It's just a simple little logo. It's not like, you're playing a highly intensive game that has ray tracing on or anything. It's not anything like that. It's, no. So you'll be fine. You'll be fine if you have this. It's not a big deal. But anyway, you can also adjust the UV mapping on it, the tiling of the texture, so you can make it look larger or smaller, which is always handy. And then for the material itself, it is kind of weird that the material selection has some extra settings for the actual 3D extrusion, but so it is what it is. It's still easy to find. You just have to click on the material instead. But we also have some extra settings regarding the extrusion. So you can change the bevel. You can give it a bevel, or you don't have to give it a bevel. So it'll just be a sharp 90-degree edge. But you can give it a bevel if you want. I just have a singular face bevel. You can also smooth it out by adding more segments to it if you want. Oh, I'm adding it to the wrong one, sorry. There we go. So see how it's kind of smoothing itself out a little bit there? But this is fine, so I'll just leave it at that. You can also add curves to it, so you can change like the curvature of it, or you can add extra little segments to it if you want, so you can have it look like a trim or a base that you see like on a wall or something, which is very cool. You can also do an outline, which you will see in a couple of my other logos. So, for example, this is what it will look like. You can change the width of it, you can change the inside width, inside thickness or outside thickness, as well as, this is for the bevel, but you can do the same thing for the thickness of it as well, which is sweet. Yeah, so you can have like a nice outline on it, extrude it out a little further so it sticks out and you can see it, and then you can duplicate this again and have a base layer on the inside of this, and maybe make it a different material if you want. Very cool. But let's go ahead and change that back, because I just like it to be solid as is. And yeah, that'll do it pretty much for the materials. Now for this ring here, I just created a primitive shape, the tube right here, and then just adjusted the height of it. I rotated it and then adjusted the height so it matches the same thickness as the letters right here, and then added the same exact bevel on it so that it matches. Very nice. Alrighty, and then I didn't really change the position of it or anything. I like it to just be nice and in the center, because usually that's where my title cards would be anyway, is right in the center. So there's that. Okay, lastly, let's talk about how to actually light this now. So again, Another plugin here called Backlight provides a nice selection of HDRIs that I can choose from, 2K or 4K, whatever you prefer. Doesn't matter, but we got all kinds of HDRs right here that we can use to light this. So I think I'm using this one. Something like that. I think I'm using this one. If not, it's something similar to that where it's kind of a warm tone light. So it gives this silver material a sort of creamier look, like a warm, like almost orange, but not quite. And it adds a little bit more warmth to the whole thing, matching the orange on this a little bit better as well. And again, just matching the overall feel and theme of Black Mesa, which is sweet. But yeah, you have all kinds of different options here, so play around with it. You can also view it right here by clicking this, so you can actually see how it's affecting your logo or whatever it is your model is. So yep, that is very cool. And yeah, that is pretty much the overall basis of how setting up a 3D model or an extrusion in Element 3D works. Then once you're done with all this, then you will just hit OK, and it will take you back to the main screen. And your logo should pop up in your scene. Alright, so now let's talk about the Optical Flares plugin. Again, I'm a flare guy. I love my lens flares. So, for this one actually is usually like the last touch, like final touch that I always add to the scene. So, I am talking about these plugins a little bit out of order, but the reason for that is I don't have Saber on this one, so I'll have to switch to a different scene, or I'll just talk about one of the logos, like maybe my main logo or something. I'll pull it up on screen and talk about it in that sort of regard. But I also might just use this scene and play around with it as an example, just so you guys can see how it works. But for the optical flares, it's pretty much the same sort of deal here. You have a little bit of controls and parameters here to mess around with. You got your position of it, the center position, so that just kind of stretches it out or goes up and down like that as a projection from the center. And we can control the brightness, we can control the scale of it, you can multiply a different color with it, you can tint it, you can set that mode, so you can multiply or just tint, whatever you prefer. You can flicker it, so if I scrub through the timeline here, you can kind of see that it's flickering, so it does that for you. You don't have to manually keyframe all that, which is nice. And some other just extra settings that are here. This one is really the only other one I change a whole bunch. I just set it to transparent, so that way you can see everything behind it that is there, and it's not just on a black screen. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is for that. Now we will just head into options. And again, pulls up a separate window where we can view all of our different flare presets and pieces here. So we can actually just assemble a flare one piece at a time, or there are also plenty of presets, again, provided by Video Copilot. Many of which my favorites come from is the Pro Presets folder right here. I'm gonna go ahead and full screen this so we can see it a little better. There we go. We got all kinds of different flares. The Artifractal one right here. This is one of the flares that I use the most. Probably. I use a couple of other flares in this selection, but I use this one a lot. Like a lot. I don't know, it's simple but effective. But the one that I actually have here in this case, because I felt like it matched the sort of sci-fi feel of Black Mesa and the Half-Life universe a little bit better, I believe is this, yeah, it's this one right here, the digital green one, and then I just changed the color to orange to match this. But yeah, it all just kind of depends on, again, the theme and style of your logo, and also your game or movie that you're playing or watching. So this matches it a little bit better than just the regular artifactal anamorphic streak lens flare that I always use. So we went ahead and just put that on there, and then, oh, actually, one more thing. I changed the global blend mode to add, so that way it also kind of affects, it kind of lights up the area around it as well, instead of just being a screen blend where this is here, but it doesn't look like it's actually affecting anything around it. It just adds a nice little extra touch to everything. It actually feels a little bit more dynamic, you know, it's affecting everything else around it, so very nice. And that's pretty much it for the flare. Like I said, this is usually one of the last steps that I do because there's not too much that goes on with this one. So yeah, let's now move on to Saber. Okay, so I've created a new solid, and we will drag Saber on top of it. Now it'll just start off with 2 points on there, and then it'll just have a basic core going from point A to B. You can choose any preset that you want, though. It doesn't have to just be like a neon strip. It could be all kinds of different things. You can do your own custom settings, of course, by going into the customized core, but they have plenty of presets that you can choose from. So for example, let's just pick electric. So it'll give you the main core, but it also has a bunch of like electrical arcs going around it and stuff like that. You can change the color of it, be whatever the hell you want. It doesn't matter. You can have green, whatever. Let's just do orange for this case since we're doing Black Mesa. Now you can also change its glow intensity, its glow bias. There's all those other settings that you can change. Again, you have tons of control over these plugins. Very nice. Alright, let's go ahead and do this. So we have just the Saber, which is this, or we have our layer masks as well. So if I do text layer, and then I choose my text layer right there, you can see, boom, there we go. It follows the text. Very cool. And let me just scale this back down again so you can see it in all of its glory. There you go. Look at that. That's so cool. I love this plugin. And this one is actually free, I believe. I don't know if I said that already, but yeah, this one is free on Video Copilot. So very cool and fun plugin to mess around with. But let's see, let's click it again. Yep. Okay, so yeah, we can adjust that. There are also a bunch of animation parameters that we can mess with here. So for, let's say, example, end offset. So if you want to do like a tracing effect, we can go all the way down, and then we would keyframe it. So we would keyframe at the beginning, then add another keyframe somewhere later on down the timeline, and then we would just increase this, and we would watch it form like that. So there's that. We can change the thickness of a bunch of things, like the core itself, or the glow, again, like I mentioned up here. Alpha mode, so right now it's just on a black screen, but we can also do enable masks, mask core, mask glow. I actually can't remember everything that's here. Disable. Oh, I wasn't even in the render settings. Whoopsie. There we go. This is what I was looking for. So yeah, black, transparent. Now it's actually going over it. And we can also change the blend mode to add, so that way it adds kind of a glowing effect, and it will also affect the area around it, much like how the flare does. But if we don't like that, then we can of course just go back to screen, or we can go just to normal. Honestly, normal looks fine too, so not a biggie on that one. But yeah, so that's how you change that. It's the same exact setting in this one as well. But yeah, that is pretty much, again, just the basis of Saber. So yeah, text layer if you want text, or if you want layer, if you have a specific shape that you made from a mask, you would do that. And you would and then you would also just put this on your actual mask layer instead of just a blank solid like this. So because it doesn't let you choose the layer mask here, so you want to make sure you actually put this effect on the layer that you did your mask on. So if this is the layer that you had your mask on, then perfect. It would be right where it's supposed to be. But yeah, so that's pretty much Saber in all of its glory as well. Like I said, very, very fun plugin to mess around with and create some very cool effects with. Then after all is said and done with those, there might be some last little bits that I might want to add for the intro sequence or whatever if I decide to do it in here. And that might be something like particles. So in this case, I decided to go with, just the basic particle system that is already included in here. And the reason why I went with that is it kind of matches, again, that same sort of theme where you find yourself in stasis, or whenever you're like talking to the G-Man or whatever and you're in that weird void with him that you're in, you see these particles flying by or just kind of floating up. So I felt like that definitely matched this sort of theme that we got going on here. But really, any other last little final touches are necessary in a case like this. Sometimes I don't do it though. I just like it plain and simple with the logo, the flare, and whatever animation that I do with the main logo, and that's it. So just depends on what the theme is. Alrighty, now we will dive into how we would set up an intro sequence, and I will do it with our most recent one here, the Hell and Damnation logo setup, since it is nice and fresh and we already have it set up in the first place. So, in order to determine the timing of my animation, I usually started off by just looking for a soundtrack that I want to use for it. Now, the soundtrack usually will just come from the game itself or the franchise, because sometimes there will be remixes of the same soundtrack on a later game within the franchise and it might sound better, so I would just want to use that instead. There's certain cases where that might happen, but either way, I'll look for the soundtrack in the same game or the franchise, and I usually look for soundtracks that have like a nice build up. I don't do ones that are already just like crazy action packed or in the main chorus of it all. I usually have it where it's just a nice build up, as usually an intro would be. If I can't find a soundtrack in the franchise or game that I really like that has that sort of build up, then what I'll do is I'll go to another game series that's similar and see if I can find one in there, or I'll just go somewhere that matches the same tone and make sure it's copyright free, and then if it matches and it works well, then I will use that one. And I will then just bring the soundtrack into here. So for example, I got one right here, and I will find a segment that I like of that soundtrack where I like the build up, and then line it up with the segment of the timeline that I have in here. And then after that, I will then match the timing with different animations on my logos. So, just for example, on this one, so in this case, I don't have any of the lead-up cards yet. I just have the animation of this logo. So I just find the beat drop on this where it would happen, line it up right here at the start, and then just go through the motions after that. Sometimes that's just how it goes. I'll only do the logo, or I will do the whole thing with the lead-up cards, so like the Moto 7 Presents, and then all that stuff. It just depends on if I want to animate those the same way I do this card or not. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just do a mask reveal animation, and usually I will do that in my editing software after the fact, because sometimes it's just easier to do it that way. And that's just how it goes. But yeah, so in this case we got just our logo. Now for the words, the 3D words reveal, it's just a nice simple opacity, keyframe, and the letters individually are turning from a 45-degree angle or something like that into position, like so. Very simple, but I always find something like that effective in most cases where you know, you don't have to go crazy with it, just a nice little reveal like that. And I also like the turn like that because it also, since it's a metallic surface, there's a lot of reflections that you will see in the environment, or from the HDR image that is lighting the logo here. So it gives some nice sheen effects on there, which is really nice. So that's usually why I always do that turn animation on the letters there. That rotation really makes them pop out. And then for the background logo here, this is actually a really interesting case here as well, where I've made a custom logo where I replaced the words and spiced them up a little bit, but I'm also using the part of the original logo as well because I really like how this looks. So sometimes I won't use it at all. Sometimes I will completely change it, or I'll use my custom logo and I won't use any of the original. Or I'll mix both, because in this case, like I said, I really like how this looks. So that's just how that worked out here. And then yeah, for the animation on this, obviously this right here is a major focal point right here on the big demon skull. So in order to have a dramatic reveal effect, I made a mask. Let me see if I can find it in here. Yep, right here. Just an ellipse mask surrounding the skull, and then I just did a simple expansion keyframe where it starts off so small in the negative numbers so you can't see it at all, and then it slowly expands out to reveal the whole thing. And again, it's lined up with the soundtrack as well. That's why I have it in here for reference. And then after that is done, it does absolutely nothing. And the reason for that too is, since I know I'm going to do some other fading effects or maybe some other mask transitions in the editing software afterwards, I want to make sure I have enough frames here to work with in case anything like that happens. And if anything, like if I have any extra frames or whatever that are not needed, I can simply just cut them out. It is always better to have extra frames to cut out than not have enough frames and then have to go back and re-render the whole sequence again. Or if you get lucky and like nothing significant changes, then you just have to re-render those last bit of extra frames again. Or not again, but you have to re-render an extra set of frames. But sometimes if there's enough things that are changing or whatever, you'll have to do the whole thing again. I've had to do that before. Trust me, it's not fun. It's just not fun. So give yourself some extra frames so that way you have room to work with, and if you actually don't end up needing it, well, then you can just cut it out and it's no big whoop. So that is why that is just left open like that right here. And then of course, as always, we got our signature little flare right there on the eye. And again, it is that artifractal flare, because this one is pretty universal. Again, I chose a different one for Black Mesa, but otherwise it's fairly universal. It's just your everyday standard anamorphic streak lens that you see on cinematic films that are stretched like with that widescreen aspect ratio. So very universal and cinematic in that sort of regard, and that's kind of another feel that I want to go for many of these intros. I want them to feel cinematic in a sort of way, and that's why I also choose the soundtracks that I do. I want them to have a nice build-up. It doesn't have to be like suspense or anything, but just a nice build-up, nice cinematic build-up to immerse the audience into what they're about to watch. Alrighty, so that is pretty much the overall process as to how I create these logos and intro sequences for my videos. It's a very fun process. I enjoy doing it. I love it. It is definitely one of my passions alongside environments and lighting. I hope you guys found this video interesting, and hopefully it was also helpful to anyone who might want to get into this sort of thing or wants to do it for their own personal projects, you name it, whatever. Also, if you guys want to see more of this, let me know in the comments down below, and also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys back in Painkiller.